as Kenyans, I think there's a big gap, deficit in terms of us as Kenyans trusting our institutions to deliver free, fair, transparent, verifiable elections. So that lack of confidence is in our institutions and our processes is what we need to address. And where we have disagreements, we should be able actually to record, to air those disagreements, say, I disagree with this, but it has to be recorded.
The man who could be the next chair of the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission during that vetting process. Sam, that was then the report that was done by that select panel, then gave its report together with the names to the president. Now Parliament reconvenes next week. So what happens next?
Right. So Justice and Legal Affairs Committee should meet next week to consider these nominees as submitted by the president. And of course, they'll be looking at various things, including their qualifications, the process or the procedure used at arriving at these nominees. Obviously, you're looking at the selection panel that just concluded its work and made the recommendations to the president. So of importance will be looking at what is their history, who are they, looking at the constitutional provisions on who can be and who cannot be a member of the commission. So we'll be expecting to hear from the selection panel raising questions, especially when it comes to, recall, one of the biggest issues during this interviewing process was that there are some 6 names that were added to the list of 105 initial commissioner candidates who had been shortlisted by the selection panel. Then there were additional names, 6 of them. And out of those 6 additional names, you find Hassan Nur Hassan coming on board as one of those persons that the president has recommended for appointment or approval so that he can be appointed as a member of the IEBC. But Yvonne, even as we wait for Justice and Legal Affairs to come on board sometime next week, there's also a question that is being raised, and different people have spoken to it in as far as the qualification of Hassan Nur Hassan. So apart from him having been an additional shortlist or addendum to the initial shortlist, but then also Njeri, what's the name? Nderito, yes, who has also been nominated to be a member of the commission. There are questions that are being raised because if you have to look at Article 88 of the Constitution, which I want to just reference here, it talks about who can and who cannot be a member of an IBC commission, and particularly 88.2 talks about the following persons a person is not eligible for appointment as a member of the commission if that person has at any time within the preceding 5 years held office or stood for election as a member of parliament or of a county assembly or a member of the governing body of a political party or holds any state office. So when it comes to holding state office, you recall that the Political Parties Act provides that the office of the registrar of political parties is a state office. So the Constitution talks about a state office there's an entire list that describes those state offices, but also says that state offices can be those that have been created by an act of parliament. So the Political Parties Act, which is an act of parliament, recognizes the office of the registrar of political parties as a state office. So if Anne Nderito has been recommended to be a member of the commission and she is a state officer, so what does that mean? What is the interpretation that the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee is going to apply, knowing too well that it is the selection panel that has made this recommendation? Are there reasons why a state officer should not be a member of the commission? I think yes, because if you're serving the state in whatever capacity, so that would be a judge, it would be a member of parliament, it would be a person at that rank, what are the chances that you can be independent of the state that you've been serving when you get into the IEBC, or even the question of perception ab initio? But then the question of taking part in an election. So you find that the Constitution is very explicit on who should not be if you have run for election as a member of parliament or a county assembly. So we know that Hassan Nur Hassan vied for the seat of governor in Mandera County in both the election of 2022 and 2017. So is that a problem? you might argue that having taken part in politics, he's running on an ODM ticket, you might argue that that would be a problem. But then the Constitution talks about having run for election as a member of parliament or member of county assembly. Yeah. But what is the intention of the Constitution in barring people who run for office in assemblies or parliament from taking part in IBC? If you look at the records, when Hassan Nur Hassan vied for governorship in Mandera in 2017, he actually appealed, he petitioned the High Court on the outcome of the election of that year. He was fighting to say that actually that election was irregular. He was suing the IBC. In 2022, similarly, he was suing the IBC. So what is the chance that he can be a fair arbiter when it comes to the election of 2027? Of course, there's already a judgment of the High Court back in June 2022 in the case of Irene Masit. Irene Masit, former commissioner who was eventually removed from office by a tribunal appointed by the president. You recall that she had vied for woman representative in 2017, but at the party primaries level. Yeah. So her name had been gazetted to be taking part in what loosely we call nominations. She never went to the full election. But the High Court decided or found that actually in taking part in a party primary, you're actually already taking part in an election. Yeah. Now, she was running to be a woman representative, so that would actually affect the election into parliament, taking part in an election for a parliamentary election. So if that was bad, because she participated in the party primaries, would it be bad for a candidate who has participated in an election and an outcome declared by IEBC just about 2.5 years ago? It will be about 3 years in August. So I think that's a question of interpretation. I think there are some appeals that have been, some petitions that have been filed in the High Court, but it's a rich ground that we'll be waiting to see what exactly transpires for those two particular nominees. And
you know, what you say is interesting, because if in 2022, less than 3 years ago, he was suing the IBC, but is today interviewing to be a commissioner within the IEBC. I mean, mine's not a legal question, but a comment on just perhaps the optics of it. One would wonder, you know, what goes through your mind. And that's not to say that people don't have the right to challenge any process that they feel in a court of law. That is a right that everybody has. But, you know, you would imagine the frame of mind you're in where you are suing this organization and, you know, 2.5 years later, you are interviewing to be a part of the organization. Maybe you want to fix things on the inside. But yes, Jay, there's quite a bit that's happening now, even before the vetting that's happening now in the or is going to happen in the National Assembly and going forward. And the noise is not just coming from petitions that are being made in court, but also from those in the political sphere and others.
Indeed. We recently, so I think it must have been either on Monday or Tuesday, when Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka issued a statement indicating that some of these appointees had very close relations with the people in the executive wing of government. I think he said that Ethekon was a county attorney in Turkana when Josephat Nanok, who is the deputy chief of staff, was governor. Then he mentioned that Hassan Nur Hassan was a relative of the minority leader, Junet Mohammed, which we reached out to Junet and he denied any of such allegations. And then also tracing it back to the selection panel, where he said some of the people who sat on that panel were advisors to the president. Again, a claim that Adams, a law professor, has denied, indicating that he has since resigned as an advisor to President Ruto. But the question that really needs to be answered here is, given an opportunity to serve, will these people be impartial? Because that is what everybody is looking at in a commission. That will they run this commission with the fidelity to law and not to any other issues that may be attributed to their previous association. Given all of us have associations, and all of us, we always say we have somewhere we come from, and there's always a relation somewhere that you cannot run away from. But should that deny you an opportunity to serve? The other thing that we must also ask ourselves is that, could we have set the bar so high knowing very well that this process is largely political and that our political environment is never as pure as we had intended it to be. So these are things that going forward we must really ask ourselves, because anybody else, even if today we decided that, well, these 4 people are too biased, because that is a key point in that petition that has been filed in court, are too biased that they cannot handle the next election, then who is this that we will get there to do the job? So I think it all goes back to the political machinations that we've done, because this select committee that interviewed this team of 7 was largely as a result of a political contestation.
Yeah.
The NADCO report that came into Parliament and now gave us this. So we must really ask ourselves, is this because every time we're done with an election, with such kind of concerns being raised, we will always have people complaining.
Yeah, and
so
indeed. Yeah.
We must find that perfect formula that will deliver a team that each and every Kenyan feels is credible. But then it goes back to the transparency of the process. Remember, about 3 weeks ago, we discussed, actually 1 month ago, we discussed a vice chairperson of the select committee that was a nominee for a deputy governor position, but also sitting in the same process to select people who would be her supervisors, something.
Right.
So the process must be seen to be very transparent from the beginning. As it is designed to keep us in a back and forth and dent the credibility of the entire selection process.
Even before those who will end up being appointed take office, they already take office with a target on their backs and with certain questions being raised. And true to that, you know, this is a political process, this is an election management body, and the complaints already began.
Let's not just be rejecting anything and everything because it's not being brought by you. That is not how to run the country. Mwananchi yeyote ambaye ana maneno, hata wale wanasiasa ambao wanapinga, peleka maoni yenu kwa kamati ya bunge ya JLAC. That is the process.
Matangazo ya kutangaza nani atakuwa commissioner iliwekwa kwa gazeti. Wewe mtu ulikuwa unataka kuwe IBC chair, ungemwambia weka makaratasi.
Hiyo IBC maneno, we are still insisting on not only inclusivity, but consultation and concurrence.
And the contestations have begun, you know, outside in the plenary, the political plenary, so to speak, Linus.
And one must always wonder, will there ever be a formula in Kenya that will make everyone happy in terms of the process of selecting IEBC commissioners? There is something the nominee for chairman, that is Erastus Ethekon, said there, which is quite accurate, and that is the low trust deficit in our, especially electoral circles. We run very, very low on trust. And that is what this team is being subjected to right now, because those who are opposing them are raising questions about either the question of bias, the question of allegiance, the question of political affiliation, and things like that. Because that is us. It's been the norm, especially for the last few elections. And the previous events actually informed this mistrust, where commissioners have played openly partisan. If you start with the last election, it was 4 versus 3, openly, completely physically, where you even had them operating from two different places. And before that, also, you know, we had a the basically running an election manipulation process, which is why the 2017 election was nullified by the Supreme Court. We see the IEBC as something, up to now, as something that is capable of being manipulated by political forces. And again, the mere action of the president, which is constitutional, to forward the names of nominees, is now interpreted entirely as a selection process. It is almost as if those who are criticizing this are forgetting that there was a process that preceded the providing of these names. But they're also raising very substantive questions on why these names and not the other names. There was also the whole question of regional balance in the appointment of the team. But most of these issues now will be left to be decided by the court, because the petition has gone to court to challenge this. We expect also that during the parliamentary processes of now approving these names, that maybe some of the petitions can also end up there. But the bottom line is, this is just about the low trust that we have in persons and also in institutions. But now here is the nightmare we are running as a country. We are facing the prospects of a continued vacuum at the IEBC. The petitions against the 4, what that means already is it will deny the IEBC the requisite quorum. If the case against the 4 continues, then it means we can only swear in 3, and therefore there is no. And we'll
have the same situation that persisted before.
Yes. And so we will walk again into the 2027 election under a very, very unpredictable cloud. Justice Kriegler, who came here at the back of our 2007-2008 post-election violence, actually left a very good script on how elections should be managed in this country. And this is exactly the scenario that his team wanted us to avoid as a country. Have a commission in place way and well before the elections, so that it's allowed to do its job in good time ahead of the election. Lastly, I think the current events also are likely to now start drawing certain speculations about what is going on. Does someone intend this to be the case, where we have an impasse, an IEBC that cannot function? Because I do not want to believe the reasons, the issues being raised by petitioners could have escaped the attention of that very eminent select committee. And just of note, we've been doing a very good job as a country in selecting the selection committee. They're really, there was the last one that selected Chebukati and team, and then comparing it with this one. Those two should actually have been the Electoral Commission, because it's made up of experts and depth of expertise and all that. Now, if they missed, if the petitions are actually admitted, then it'll be a very, very serious indictment on that team. It will actually destroy some of those reputations, because some of them are really, actually most of them are reputed election experts, legal minds and all that. You saw the kind of questions they were asking to the team. But did they miss something as simple as what Sam was illustrating correctly about who a state officer is? Did they actually miss that? How did that name, if the court finds that it was not a name that should have been forwarded, then that'll be a very, very bad thing for the selection committee. It'll be a stain on both their collective and individual capacities.
And remember, the outcome is only as good as the process.
Absolutely.
And what is interesting is that this select panel, remember there was one before, broad-based and NADCO. Some of the members of that initial one were still here, including the chair, Dr. Nelson Makandia. And, they sat for, was it over a year, while there was a political impasse in the country, and then it was reconstituted, and now here it is. And what some will start to say, if that petition succeeds, is if there was a question in the process of one or two, what about the whole? And those are the things that then start to raise even more credibility issues with whatever new commission comes in. I mean, I think another point for me to note with this whole process is, should we succeed with getting all of these commissioners in office, you note there will all be a totally new set of commissioners. This is an entirely new commission. They have to hit the ground running in terms of understanding how the commission works and with all of the backlog that they've got. One of the things I think that was recommended, even as we were saying, the timelines within which we should have an electoral management body in the lead up to a general election, was to have some type of continuity, which we had attempted to do with the previous commission, where you have some who have been serving and have the timelines staggered.
Exactly.
In this one, we will have a whole new set of commissioners whose term will come to an end again collectively at the same time, which means what we have set in place is having an entirely new commission every time. That means institutional memory and understanding of how the commission works is something that they have to, sort of catch up with very quickly once they're appointed. I think the other thing is obviously what is pending. Boundaries delimitation that is well past the deadline by over 2 years. And remember, even with that, some of the questions about how we proceed to the next general election. As part of the last delimitation, remember there was the 20+ protected constituencies? That protection has now lapsed. What are we going to do with those ones? How is this new commission going to deal with the ruling by the High Court on the census results from the Northern Frontier region? Even as they look at that, okay, so do they then conduct a delimitation process now, considering how emotive that is together with elections? Or do they conduct the process and say, well, this will only apply in 2032 and not 2027? Whichever way, emotions will be raw as you lead up to the 2027 election. And then, of course, there's the by-elections that are pending for those many constituencies that remain unrepresented for over 2 years now. Some of them by death of those who are holding office, others by the fact that people who were holding elective office were then, appointed to cabinet. So there's quite a bit of work, and all of these delays again just starts to give us concern about how quickly, I mean, even there's a voter registration process, a massive one, there's continuous, and of course ensuring that is, ongoing. And I think the nominee for chair, Ethekon, did speak about the voter registration process with the young population in the country. But you can see how much they have on their plate and so little time. And usually it is in circumstances like these that you have external pressure. And you have to wonder if sometimes the things that we do in this country are by design. So you give them little time to start to do things, and that usually gives room for outsiders to try and manipulate the process. I'm not saying that that's what will happen, and not casting aspersions on these individuals and how they will conduct themselves should they be formally appointed. I mean, but you have to see just what sort of circumstances they will be coming into, and it is not easy, Sam.
And again, as you say that, there's still more work the new commissioners will have to do. There are several directors that have since retired or resigned, left the organization, in this case IEBC. There are senior managers that have since left IEBC, so they have to be recruited. The commission itself has been bleeding quite a lot when it comes to even other junior officers, because people are looking for new prospects. They have also seen how tainted a commission it has become, especially if you have to look at the split in 2022 between the Cherera 4 versus the Chebukati 3, and eventually eventually what ended up being a tribunal to remove Irene Masit and others who chose to resign. So there's that work that has to be done for the commission to really function, because the positions of senior managers as well as the directors, those are positions that cannot be filled by the secretariat, but rather the commissioners have to be involved. The other question that it will also be important, if and also take interest in what Silvana Sosoro says, the majority whip, that kama wangetaka kuwa na commissioner fulani, they should have asked them to apply. I'm just wondering, is he overspeaking, or what's happening? Because that raises eyebrows. Is it possible to ask someone to apply? If in a position of influence, is it possible to ask someone to apply for the position of commissioner or chairperson of IBC? Exactly, it's quite telling, because then you start to wonder, this no, they're not 8, they're 7 nominees that Justice and Legal Affairs Committee will be processing come next week. Is there anyone out of them that applied after they were requested by certain forces to go ahead and apply? And I say that because also if you speak to some of the people that were seeking to take those positions when they were applying, they were busy saying that, can you drop in a word, perhaps tell so-and-so, because they have heard of what considerations are being taken. So I mean, it's politics, it's independent, but also within a very serious context of what we see here. I also wanted to make a clarification here that Hassan Nur Hassan, after being defeated in the Mandera gubernatorial election in 2022, he actually conceded to Eden Khalif. He didn't contest that decision at the High Court, but he had contested in the 2017 at the High Court, and of course returned the result that Ali Roba was validly elected to be in that position. So I think it's a matter that we'll also be waiting, but also the political class has also been jittery. I just wanted us to listen to what Professor Kithure Kindiki said. He was in Mbeere North recently, that constituency that no longer has a member of parliament after Geoffrey Ruku became cabinet secretary.
Sasa mimi nangojea IBC tangaze. Ikitangaza mimi nakuja kukaa hapa. Na sitakuja kukaa hapa ati kusema ni huyu ama ni huyu. Ni kusema can you agree? Once we agree ule candidate wetu, kabla tupige kura, hawa 7 tuwe tumewasote. Njogu nile magoi mgongo. So mimi nitabebana na hao 7, nitawatafutia viti kwa serikali au sort them out. Serikali inatosha watu wote wa Kenya. Na mbele wa Kenya. Kweli si kweli. Kwa hivyo that is the assurance I want to give you.
So clearly IBC is standing in the way of so many ambitions.
Interesting. I think, like we have explained here, the to-do list for the new commission, if at all they make it to office, is huge. But then again, we must also ask ourselves, will they have the sufficient budget? Because some of these things have overlapped, and they ought to have been done in the previous years. So will they be able to convince the Exchequer to allocate enough money to do all these things at the same time? That's also a question that needs to be asked.
Yeah, it's all about the money. So
well, they'll first need to make to office.
Yeah.
Make it to the office.
And, first order of business is make it to office.
Yes.
To office first.
By the way, Yvonne, if Parliament approves of these names,
yeah,
the remaining 3 names that the president has, they are lost, and the selection panel, of course, has been dissolved. If Parliament rejects either of the names, then the president still has a chance to pick from the list of 3.
Okay.
So it's a very critical moment for JLAC to consider and decide.
Interesting. Not to mention the court petition.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, there's quite a bit to be decided before we finally say we've got an electoral management body in place. Meanwhile, the campaign's gone fever pitch. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, it's they may as well be ready for an election tomorrow.
By acclamation? It's the only way you can do an election right now.
Right? Yes, at this point, we're considering what we have or don't have. Because Jamila is not here, I will take the opportunity to say tumemaliza maneno, and also because she is not here, I will take the opportunity to go first.